This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
China's experience offers hope as the world battles the growing coronavirus outbreak. Libyan rebel commander Khalifa Haftar meets Macron and Merkel as he begins his European tour. And relatives and friends of victims of last year's Ethiopian Airlines tragedy hold remembrance events. Hello and a warm welcome to Africa Live on CGTN. I'm Lindy Mtongana in Nairobi. And with me in studio is Uche Okoronkwo with a preview of your business news.
Thank you, Lindy. And here's a look at what's coming up on Africa Live Biz. The European Central Bank warns of a major financial crisis unless the coronavirus is contained. And Zimbabwe relaxes strict controls on foreign exchange as inflation bites. Of course, all that coming up within the program. For now, back to you, Lindy.
Thanks, Uche. We start the program with some breaking news. The World Health Organization has declared the current coronavirus outbreak a pandemic. So far, more than 120,000 cases have been reported in more than 100 countries across the world. While making the announcement, WHO Director General Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus said the finding is based on the current assessment. Now, a pandemic is the worldwide spread of a new disease, this according to the WHO. On January 30th, the WHO classified the novel coronavirus as a global public health emergency.
We're deeply concerned both by the alarming levels of spread and severity and by the alarming levels of inaction. We have therefore made the assessment that COVID-19 can be characterized as a pandemic. Pandemic is not a word to use lightly or carelessly. It's a word that, if misused, can cause unreasonable fear or unjustified acceptance that the fight is over, leading to unnecessary suffering and death.
Well, that is the WHO's Director General there, officially declaring the current coronavirus outbreak a pandemic, and of course warning the world there that the word is not to be used lightly. Well, let's take a closer look at what is happening as far as this outbreak is concerned. Now, Bahrain has reported 77 cases among its citizens evacuated from Iran this week. 24 new cases have been reported on the Chinese mainland. About half of those have come from abroad. The country has a total of 79 imported cases traced back to Iran and Italy. Out of the total 81,000 confirmed cases, more than 70% have recovered. Over 16,000 patients are still receiving treatment, while more than 3,000 patients died. Now, cities outside Wuhan, the epicenter of the outbreak, have seen no new cases for 6 consecutive days. Outside China, however, more than 40,000 cases have been reported in over 100 countries. Italy is the worst affected, confirming over 10,000 cases and over 600 deaths. Iran has the second largest outbreak outside China with 9,000 confirmed cases and over 350 deaths. South Korea has announced a spike in new cases, the first in 5 days, bringing the total to nearly 8,065 deaths. In the U.S., local media say the national tally has surpassed 1,000 and at least 31 people have died. Well, African countries are also continuing to report cases of COVID-19. 12 African countries have now confirmed cases of the virus. Côte d'Ivoire is the latest to report its first case. Morocco has reported 2 more cases, bringing the number there to 5. The country has also confirmed 1 death. South Africa confirmed 6 new cases, bringing the total number to 15. The Democratic Republic of Congo reported its first infection. Egypt has recorded the highest number of cases, but authorities have reported that 26 of the 59 confirmed are now testing negative. The majority of cases are from a single Nile cruise ship. 1 German national in Egypt has died from the virus. Algeria has 20 cases. Other countries that have reported infections include Burkina Faso, Cameroon, Nigeria, Togo, Tunisia, and Senegal. Well, as the number of COVID-19 cases continues to rise across the globe, the head of the World Health Organization has commented on China's control efforts, saying these measures could be adopted by other countries.
We were saying to the rest of the world there is a window of opportunity. China is taking massive action, so use this window of opportunity, and if any case comes to your country, contain it as soon as possible.
Now, Italy says it will allocate over $28 billion to ride out the economic impact of the coronavirus outbreak. It's triple the amount proposed last week by the government, as the emergency has escalated in a matter of days. Italy is already facing a budget deficit, and experts say the extra spending could lift that deficit above a ceiling set by the EU. Meanwhile, the Italian Prime Minister says tighter virus control measures will be announced. The country now has over 600 deaths and more than 10,000 confirmed cases, making it the worst affected after China. The entire nation is now in its second day of a lockdown. Well, even as cases in Italy rise, some citizens, it would seem, are not too worried. Let's take a look.
Lei in giro senza mascherina, non è che ha paura di
che?
del corona?
Ma di che una cammina?
A me non mi importa proprio niente, una volta si muore, basta.
In giro senza mascherina, non è che per...
No, a me non me ne frega niente, non ho paura manco di morire.
Siamo tranquillissimi, qui le persone anziane dovrebbero essere un po' agitate. Noi siamo forti e giovani, non ci attacca.
Figlia mia, un'influenza. Igiene, punto, stop.
Perché invece la gente si è fatta prendere paura?
Credina, non serve secondo me. Serve se c'hai magari, che ne so, dei sintomi.
Ah, non mi frega niente, tanto io un po' di anni ho, 80 anni, campo, moro, arrivederci.
Now, just a reminder of that breaking news that has come out in just the past hour. The World Health Organization has declared the current coronavirus outbreak a pandemic. And that's primarily because more than 120,000 cases have now been reported in over 100 countries across the world. The announcement was made by the WHO Director General, Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus, who said the finding is based on the current assessment. He added that a pandemic is the worldwide spread of a new disease. On January 30th, the WHO classified the novel coronavirus as a global public health emergency. This latest announcement is now an escalation of the virus. Now, we will bring you more on that, but for now, let's turn to how the United States has been responding to the outbreak. The United States has, in fact, been criticized for not doing enough to prepare for this outbreak. So how has the White House responded to the crisis? Here's a recap.
First came the blame on Democrats.
And this is their new hoax. But, you know, we did something that's been pretty amazing. We're 15 people in this massive country.
Then came the flu defense.
We've had 11 deaths, and they've been largely old people who were susceptible to what's happening. Now, that would be the case, I assume, with the regular flu, too.
That was followed by an attempt to calm the nerves.
We are going to take care of and have been taking care of the American public and the American economy.
President Donald Trump has been accused of denying, downplaying and outright rejecting the concerns over the COVID-19 outbreak. So let's look at the facts. According to US publication The Atlantic, the country remains dangerously limited in its capacity to test people for the illness. The report further states that until Monday, just over 4,000 people had been tested nationwide. Comparing this with other countries, as of Monday, South Korea had tested more than 100,000 people with an average of 15,000 people each day. The UK has already tested almost 25,000 people. To make matters worse, many states have refused to release testing data and are only publishing confirmed cases. Test eligibility is also a major issue. In many states, public health departments refuse to test people unless they get hospitalized or had traveled to China. But Trump seems to believe the current system is working rather well.
But as of right now and yesterday, anybody that needs a test, that's the important thing. And the tests are all perfect. Like the letter was perfect. The transcription was perfect, right?
A lot of questions are also being asked over how authorities are handling confirmed patients.
And then after my wife's test results came back positive, they asked me to be tested. And they didn't tell me to do anything other than my normal activity. So I continued to work. And then 5 days after that, after I got tested, I was found to be positive.
Last month, the White House gagged government health officials and scientists from speaking about the outbreak without approval from Vice President Mike Pence. As cases continue to rise, Democratic presidential candidates Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders decided to cancel their election rallies on Tuesday. But Trump still remains non-committal, days after refusing to back down.
We'll have tremendous rallies, and we're doing very well, and we've done a fantastic job with respect to that subject on the virus. Yeah.
Given the situation, experts believe patients with possible symptoms are left to fend for themselves, and they fear the virus is being allowed to fester and spread across the country as the Trump administration continues to play catch-up.
Now, the elderly appear to be highly susceptible to developing serious symptoms from COVID-19, and it's worrying senior citizens around the world, many of whom are unsure how to protect themselves. CGTN's reporter Nitsa Soledad Perez has this report from an assisted living facility in the U.S. state of Florida.
According to the U.S. Surgeon General, the average age of U.S. coronavirus fatalities is 80, which is why so many Florida residents are on edge. Florida is home to the second largest population of senior citizens in the U.S., after Maine. At this assisted living facility in Miami, seniors are nervous.
This is making me sick. I feel fear all the time. My nerves are altered. If I watch the news, it's all about the virus. If I click on anything, it's about the virus.
Jose Duaso is owner and administrator of 3 assisted living facilities in South Florida. The majority of his residents are Hispanics.
We are at a level 1 response that anyone that may have any type of flu symptom cannot enter the facility. That power has been given to me by the governor by stating a state of emergency for the state of Florida. I'm very worried because if one of my residents picks up the corona, most likely 10 will die right after that resident.
This couple has been married for 65 years. Sahara and Tomas decided to move to this facility after Tomas' health started to decline. He's 94. She is 98.
I'm watching TV news all the time because I'm really worried. I mean, this is a global virus now, and it's really scary. Since yesterday, I'm washing my hands more often. I really didn't know how to, but on TV, they're telling us what to do. I go to the bathroom frequently to wash them. I also use wipes. I try to take care of myself and my poor husband.
Tomas is a bit more optimistic.
The government is trying to do what they can. They're trying to end this as quickly as it can. I hope all of this goes back to normal soon, but we do have to wait.
The Diaz de Villegas go out for dinners and activities with her daughter. But for now, they understand that they have to stay in for a few weeks. The U.S. government has announced new measures for nursing homes and assisted living facilities like this one.
We issued more guidance to nursing homes about really upping their screening of people that are coming into the nursing home and making sure that, they're gloved and they have masks so that we can protect people that are in the nursing homes.
We followed up with the administrator of the facility, and Duaso told us that they have not received new guidelines or support from state or federal authorities. These facilities appear to be on their own in dealing with the virus. Nitsa Soledad Perez, CGTN, Miami.
Now let's go to Tunisia, where a 6th confirmed case of the coronavirus was announced on Tuesday evening. This follows test results carried out on 44 people suspected of carrying the virus. Authorities have taken new measures to stop the outbreak. CGTN's Adnan Chouachi has more.
A national security meeting was held at Carthage Palace. The head of state said Tunisians can beat COVID-19.
وليطمئن التونسيون والتونسيات كلهم.
The state has taken all necessary measures to stop the infection. It is not the first time in Tunisia or in the world that people are facing an epidemic. We must protect our citizens and ensure their safety.
Authorities suspended all cruises between Tunisia and Italy, while those between Tunisia and France were reduced to one per week from Tunis to Marseille.
Tunisia will receive flights from Italy only from Rome. We'll cut the number of flights from 14 to 3. These measures will remain in effect until April the 4th, 2020. And this date can be adjusted according to the developments of the situation.
In an unexpected move, the Office of Fatwa has suspended the procedures of converting to Islam for any non-Muslim foreigner who wants to marry a Tunisian woman. The decision was taken to prevent new COVID-19 infections. It was rejected by many Islamic scholars, including MPs.
We understand any decision to preserve the public health and to limit the spread of the coronavirus, but the number of conversions is very limited. It's unnecessary to suspend the conversion procedures.
The National Committee on New and Emerging Diseases announced that over 2,200 people have been placed in quarantine in 6 different cities across Tunisia. 750 of them ended this isolation period after 14 days. The Ministry of Health stressed the need for all citizens, including travelers, to comply with the self-quarantine measures in order to preserve public health. Abdeltif al-Mekki said any violation of the quarantine decision will be punishable by law. Abdel Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
The Jewish community in South Africa has taken a stand against racism targeted at Chinese citizens in the country. Anti-Chinese sentiment has been growing in Africa and other parts of the world as more cases of coronavirus continue to be reported. CGTN's Julie Shire has more.
13 people in South Africa have so far been diagnosed with COVID-19. Fears of its spread has sparked anger towards the Chinese community.
There's this ignorance that it's a China virus. It's not a China virus, it's a global virus. And in fact, we're all in it together. A global recession is pretty much on the cards. And so the reliance as the WHO must be on facts and not fear, and on science and not rumor, because there's so much incorrect and fake news going around, which is inflaming the sentiments.
It's estimated that over 300,000 Chinese people live and work in South Africa. The Jewish community has called for an end to insults and abuse. In a show of solidarity, its board of deputies visited the China Mall in Johannesburg.
We are seeing children at school being discriminated. We're seeing in shopping centres Chinese people being abused. We can't stand for that. We have to stand up against the hate.
Some shoppers here are being cautious, using protective masks, but others do not feel threatened.
We come here every day and no problem whatsoever. We in and out dealing with the Chinese directly, and none of us got sick. So I don't see the panic for running away from the Chinese people.
Medical experts, however, warn that ethnic targeting could hinder progress in fighting the illness.
If you stigmatize people, you drive them underground. If you drive them underground, you can't trace the chains of transmission, and you can't put into place epidemiological controls, that is control of the spread of infection. What we need to do is impose hygiene preventive measures in the population. These aren't new. These are for all infectious diseases.
Walking through China Mall here in Johannesburg, there is no sense of fear or panic, but the anti-China sentiment, if it continues, could potentially hurt these businesses. Julie Shire, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
And just another reminder of that breaking news this hour. The World Health Organization has declared the current coronavirus outbreak a pandemic. So far, more than 120,000 cases have been reported in over 100 countries across the world. The announcement was made by the WHO Director General, Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus, who said the finding is based on the current assessment. He added a pandemic is the worldwide spread of a new disease. Now, on the 30th of January, the WHO first classified the novel coronavirus as a global public health emergency. Today's announcement is an escalation of that virus. Well, time now for a short break. Here's what's coming up in just a moment. Relatives and friends of victims of last year's Ethiopian Airlines tragedy hold remembrance events. And we highlight the latest efforts by the Somali National Army to defeat Al-Shabaab.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. You've got to get out, go there, and you'll find them. In the bazaars of Casablanca, among the crowds in Cairo,
who come to visit Cairo, the ancient capital of Egypt.
Along the waters of the Nile, along the sands of the Sahara. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. No one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
General Khalifa Haftar, the head of the LNA forces in eastern Libya, is on a European tour. He's met the French President Emmanuel Macron and German Chancellor Angela Merkel. The German Chancellor has been working with the UN to revive the outcomes of the Berlin conference on Libya. Since the conference concluded in January, the political situation in Libya has worsened. Here's Adel Al-Makhrawi with more.
Libya's Khalifa Haftar, the head of the LNA forces, has begun his European tour in France. President Emmanuel Macron was the first in Europe to give Haftar a political recognition. In Paris, the Eastern Libyan commander offered to sign and commit to a ceasefire only if the other side abides by it.
There is support from France to Khalifa Haftar and the Libyan National Army forces. The LNA is leading major efforts that suit French interests, like fighting terrorists in Libya and freezing the flow of migrants. France is favoring Haftar in the conflict. When Macron meets Haftar alone, it will show support to him and his mission against the capital Tripoli.
France says there are no meetings scheduled with the head of the government of National Accord, Fayez al-Sarraj. From Paris, Haftar has headed to Berlin, where he met a more balanced player in his nation's crisis. Chancellor Angela Merkel insisted that there shall be no military solution to the biggest conflict in North Africa.
The political process is facing many obstacles, especially since the Berlin Conference and the resignation of the UN envoy to Libya. There is direct and indirect French support to Haftar. While Germany is unbiased, it's trying to lead the Libyan talks. It's also trying to balance the stances from France and Italy.
Back at home, LNA has announced its determination to fight on all fronts the government of National Accord forces and the militias supporting it, while the general still insists that he will not be sitting in direct talks with his rival Fayez al-Sarraj. All three UN negotiation tracks are failing, and while Europe doesn't want to see stagnation in the Libyan file, the situation on the ground is not helping it to revive talks between rival factions. Adel Al-Makhrawi, CGTN, Cairo.
A recent operation by Somalia's National Army has denied Al-Shabaab plans to expand its areas of control in central Somalia. A pro-government militia supported by the army has also been vital in securing Hiran and Middle Shabelle from Al-Shabaab. CGTN's Abdulaziz Bello has more.
These government troops are back from the front lines. The commander leading the operation is claiming victory over a recent armed confrontation with Al-Shabaab, an Al-Qaeda proxy battling the Somali government for over a decade now. The latest clashes took place in El Ali, some 70 kilometers west of Beledweyne town in central Somalia.
Al-Shabaab launched an attack on pro-government militia known as Ma'awesli. We mobilized our forces and sent soldiers for extra reinforcement. We killed 4 armed militants and recovered an array of weapons.
Ma'awisley are based in the Hiran and Shabelle regions. The forces, only armed with AK-47 rifles, lack proper military capability to withstand militant attacks, but have remained effective over the years in containing Al-Shabaab's threat in both regions, denying the group a chance to expand its foothold in Johar and towns in the Hiran region.
Our mission is not done. We will continue to pursue the terrorists wherever they hide. We are ready to offer support to the Maawesli militia as they have proved effective in tackling the militants in south and central Somalia.
Mogadishu has in recent months begun taking over army positions in parts of the country as the African Union troops continue with the gradual handover of security responsibilities to Somali forces. Taking over full security ownership is expected to take place in the coming months and years. For now, the country's armed forces is in control of army bases in the Lower Shabelle, Gedo and Middle Shabelle regions. Several attacks on army bases by Al-Shabaab in recent months have caused significant loss on the army's side. But authorities say they remain optimistic of capturing and holding towns and villages on their own. Abdulaziz Bilon, CGTN, Mogadishu, Somalia.
Relatives and friends of those who died in the Ethiopian Airlines plane crash in March 2019 have held memorial events in Ethiopia. The United Nations honored the 21 staff it lost in the disaster. CGTN's Koleto Wanjoy reports from Addis Ababa.
A year later, family members and friends of United Nations staff remember their loved ones.
Many of our families that passed away did not pass away in the line of duty per se as the military or as peacekeeping. They passed away just doing good old development work, just waking up every morning to make sure that one more life was better off in the evening than it was in the morning when they woke up. And we hope that the only way that we can pay tribute to their memory is that we continue to ensure that each morning when we wake up, we make sure that as we go to bed at night, there is one more life that is the better for our having woken up.
None of the 157 people aboard the Ethiopian Airlines 737 MAX Boeing plane survived. Earlier, all relatives of the victims of the 2019 plane crash held a memorial service at the crash site, which is over 100 kilometers from the capital, Addis Ababa. An interim report into the crash has been released by the Ethiopia Aircraft Investigation Bureau. Aviation journalist Kaliesus Bekele says it suggests the aircraft was seemingly in good condition, but developed issues during the flight.
The training, the difference training provided by the manufacturer, the difference training from the Boeing B737 NG next generation to MAX aircraft, B737 MAX aircraft, was found to be inadequate. And it also states that the MCAS design, the flight control system, the MCAS design, which depends on a single angle of attack sensor, made the MCAS vulnerable to uncommanded activation, undesired or uncommanded activation, which leads to the uncommanded nosedive movement.
The final report is yet to be compiled.
What makes this investigation very complicated is that all the B737 MAX aircraft are grounded for 1 year now. You don't usually have investigation going on while the aircraft, all the jetliners all over the world are grounded. This could have happened to Concorde aircraft many years ago. So this is very unusual. So it's not only for Ethiopian Airlines, it's not only for Boeing. As a whole, for the industry in general, it has a paramount importance in learning and understanding what happened so that similar accidents would not happen.
In 2019, Boeing announced it would release $100 million for relatives affected by the crash. The money was to be paid out to relatives of 346 victims of 737 MAX crashes in Ethiopia and Indonesia. Some of the relatives of the victims have since rejected this and sued Boeing. All 737 MAX airplanes remain grounded globally, but the pain of those who lost their loved ones remains fresh. Coletta Njohi, CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Let's turn to Mozambique now, where a year ago, Cyclone Idai made landfall in the port city of Beira. The tropical storm caused billions of dollars worth of damage in Zimbabwe, Malawi and Mozambique. CGTN's Asta Tal takes a look back at the cost of the damage and the current situation on the ground.
It's been a year since Cyclone Idai made its devastating landfall in Mozambique. Tens of thousands of homes were destroyed. Hundreds of thousands of people were displaced, and 602 killed. The UN estimates over 1 million people were affected. The cyclone also hit Zimbabwe and Malawi. This leaves them vulnerable to future climate shocks. Mozambique was hit by Cyclone Kenneth a month after Idai made landfall. The storms inflicted an estimated $3 billion in damage, around 20% of Mozambique's GDP. While there was a global effort to raise money following Cyclone Idai, only 38.4% of funding was raised for the humanitarian response for Mozambique. Aid agencies have appealed for more funding. Among them is Rotafina Donko, Oxfam's Mozambique country director, who stated funding is needed so agencies can better assist communities. Astatal, CGTN.
In international news, Russia's upper house of parliament has approved amendments to the constitution that relate to presidential terms. This after the lower house passed those amendments earlier on Wednesday. The changes could see Vladimir Putin stay on as president even after his term limit expires in 2024, allowing him to potentially lead the country until 2036, longer than former Soviet leader Joseph Stalin. However, the bill has further checks to complete. It must first be approved by 2/3 of the country's regional parliaments and then a referendum next month. Putin is currently serving his 4th presidential term. Well, time now for a look at your latest business news. Here's Uche with the latest.
Thanks, Lindy. And coming up on Africa Live Biz. The European Central Bank warns of a major financial crisis unless the coronavirus is contained. And Zimbabwe relaxes strict controls on foreign exchange as inflation bites.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Now, Europe could face a major economic shock similar to the 2008 global financial crisis, and that's if governments don't coordinate to tackle the spread of the coronavirus. That's according to Europe's Central Bank President Christine Lagarde. She called on leaders to throw their weight behind a move to protect their economies. Now, Lagarde is set to announce measures to counter the impact of the spread. Some of the measures include providing super cheap credit to maintain liquidity in the bloc. By providing cost-efficient funding, policymakers will be able to boost public spending as monetary policy reaches its limits. Now, the ECB president, however, says the measures need backing from member states to succeed. Lagarde expects banks to keep lending to businesses in the affected countries. Italy, of course, is the worst-hit EU member with about 600 deaths and more than 10,000 cases so far. And the Bank of England has confirmed an emergency cut in interest rates to boost the economy. That's amid the coronavirus pandemic. Policymakers there have slashed rates from 0.75% to 0.25%, dropping costs back down to a record low. Additionally, the bank says it will free up funds for extra lending power to help banks support businesses in the affected areas. Further measures are also expected to be announced in a bid to support growth and create employment opportunities in the budget. Now, the budget is expected to include financial help from companies struggling with cash flow problems, as well as individuals facing financial losses and public services. And heading back to the continent now, Zimbabwe is set to adopt a managed float exchange rate regime, adding a strict control of foreign exchange. This, of course, is the latest currency reform as the government battles spiraling inflation. Under the system, the central bank will allow markets to determine the exchange rate. However, it will intervene to keep the rates at a desired pace. Now, banks are now expected to narrow the gap with the unofficial market by allowing trade on a more transparent platform. Zimbabwe's string of currency reforms have so far failed. Last June, it made its interim currency the country's sole legal tender, ending a decade of dollarization. The central bank has controlled the interbank forex trading market, which was introduced in February 2019. The country has been grappling with bouts of hyperinflation since 2008, resulting in a deep economic crisis. Now, South Africa's Competition Commission has announced that giant telecoms network Vodacom will reduce monthly data prices by at least 30%. This will be effective from the 1st of April. The announcement is likely to be seen as a victory for consumers. South Africans pay more for data than in other nations where the same telecom service providers operate. Here's CGTN's Yolisa Njamela with more.
Research done by the Competition Commission reveals that compared to other international scenarios, South Africans on prepaid plan are paying a lot for data, that the prices are not just higher, but substantially higher. Upon finding out about this, South African consumers took on the telecommunications giants in this country. In a social media campaign known as Data Must Fall, the consumers rallied against expensive data. Fast forward to 2020, data prices, at least for one telecommunications company, Vodacom, have fallen. All Vodacom customers are set to pay at least 30% less for their data bundles, as the mobile operator has agreed to slash its prices and provide free internet access to the poor, as demanded by the Competition Commission.
In terms of the agreement, and following confirmation by the tribunal, Vodacom will introduce price reductions across all its monthly bundles and provide free access to basic internet, essential services, and cheaper pricing to the poorest communities. And really, I think the agreement that we've come to is very beneficial for South Africa.
The mobile operator CEO says the company will sacrifice at least 2.7 billion rand a year as part of the agreement. The company will further decrease its bundle prices in April next year, which will mean more than a 40% price reduction overall. About 2,000 suburbs and villages living below the poverty line will get personalized discounts. The deal will also mean an extension of the number of zero-rated websites and services. Those services will include more than 20 specific government-related sites around services such as education and healthcare.
Vodacom shall extend the current zero rating to essential state and emergency specified sites. These will enable citizens to access emergency services and allow citizens to access crucial government information and services. The list extends to more than 20 sites and includes sites of the services within the Department of Health.
More and more of the core services that lie at the heart of a development agenda are now being rendered through digital means. Health services, education services increasingly will be provided through the gadgets and the instruments that we have surrounded ourselves with. And when prices are high, it means that the power that digitization can bring to all those development services are chilled, are suppressed, are reduced. When we bring prices down and we increase access, we can now begin to create these platforms in significant ways.
Vodacom and MTN were harshly criticized for using their market dominance to maintain price discrimination strategies here in South Africa. Yolisa Njamela for CGTN in Pretoria, South Africa.
And let's head to Tunisia now. The country is seeking a new loan deal with the International Monetary Fund after slashing its economic growth forecast due to the impact of the coronavirus on tourism. The government is seeking about $3 billion to plug its budget deficit.
Tunisian economists warned that the growth rate could be less than 1%, as announced by the premier, because Tunisia's main economic partners are also facing challenges following the COVID-19 outbreak.
The repercussions of the coronavirus crisis will be hard on the Tunisian economy. Agriculture was affected by drought and the state revenues and exports are down. 2020 will be a very difficult year.
The governor of the Central Bank of Tunisia noted that the government will be able to implement the necessary structural, economic and social reforms imposed by the IMF.
The EFF and the IMF were established to provide assistance to countries experiencing serious payment imbalances because of structural impediments or slow growth and inherently weak balance of payments position. It will end in May, and we will meet all the conditions to obtain the sixth installment of the current IMF loan deal.
The Minister of Tourism said the government is aware that the COVID-19 outbreak will have a direct impact on tourism. This vital sector employs over 1 million people and provides the country's main revenues in foreign exchange.
The slowdown is noticeable and normal due to the panic in Europe following the coronavirus outbreak. The negative impact on tourism is minimal for the moment. We're increasing control at the ports and airports.
The African Development Bank Group announced this week its readiness to assist Tunisia in implementing its development programs and projects following the support to the state budget in December 2019 with around $517 million.
Prime Minister Lies El-Farfer said he aims to improve the business and investment climate in 2020. According to the Foreign Investment Promotion Agency, foreign investment dropped by 7.6% in 2019. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
Well, that's all for now on Africa Live Biz, but ahead on Global Business Africa, Zimbabwe introduces new foreign exchange reforms as it battles hyperinflation. Of course, more on that coming up at the top of the hour. For now, back to you, Lindy.
Thanks, Uche. Well, let's take a short break. Here's what's still ahead on Africa Live. Coming up, we find out how a group of female hip-hop artists are fighting gender inequality in Senegal.
Join us in Global Business and see Africa through our eyes.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Qanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
We start in Senegal now, where a group of women is shaking up the arts and music industries. The hip-hop collective is lifting the veil on gender inequality in the West African country. CGTN's Laura Walubengu has that story.
Meet Aminata Gaye. She has made a name for herself in Senegal. She sings about women's rights and empowerment. This has caused ripples amongst those who are against gender equality.
I saw other women, other realities, other problems, because all these women have their own stories, their own beginnings, and it has really inspired me.
Gaye is part of a group of rappers which go by the name the Genji Collective. The group has helped her fight off critics.
We inform, we organize meetings, closed-door or public conferences to speak about all that, to denounce, to speak about women in the Senegalese urban culture. It's not easy to be a female rap artist. We speak about all that. We speak about all the problems that women face.
Around 70 women make up the Genji hip-hop collective. The group is designed to get female rappers and artists to meet each other and share experiences. Ina Tiam is a co-founder of the group.
So the objective was to know who is who and who does what, and then to help each other. I think we've made it because it's been 3 years. We organized our first festival and we are currently working on an album.
Tiam is a photographer who began her career taking photographs of rappers. Today she is also a film director shooting music videos.
What I'm passionate about to start with, we are in a country where many things are often taboo. There's so many things that are not spoken about, which is often the source of problems, especially for women. So with pictures I can say those things.
Genji is a word to describe a woman in the local Wolof language. The Genji collective is not only causing a stir in the arts industry, but last year they were on the front line of protests against violence against women. A group and lawmakers in the country succeeded in getting together sentences for convicted rapists. Laura Walubengo, CGTN.
And coming up in your sports news, up next. We're back in Senegal, where Dakar hosts the 7th edition of the Female Auto Racing Trophée Mazo Rally.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
Africa Live. Find your voice.